Hey, this is Jonas. I'm an indie game developer currently working on an indie game called Will You Snail, a rage game platformer where you go up against a superhuman evil AI that tries to predict your moves and then spawns traps in real time in order to destroy you. But in this video I actually want to talk about playtesting, because that's what I'm doing at the moment. I'm polishing and I'm in the midst of playtesting the heck out of this game.
I knew you'd mess up that jump. No surprises here.
So here's how I handle playtesting for my games. Why should you care about playtesting? Very simple answer: you will make better game. Making games is like painting blindly. You need other people to look at your painting in order to tell you how it looks like.
Here's one way you can do it, right? I have a Will You Snail Discord group. For now, mostly a bunch of playtesters in there. Uploading your game to Steam is actually quite useful. Make sure all of your playtesters always stay up to date with the newest version of the game. And then I have a couple of ways to gather feedback from them. The first one, of course, being right here in Discord. Whenever they discover something or want to discuss something with me, they can do so right here in Discord. Then I set up two more ways. Okay, so now here in the game. Now here in the game there is a button. In the main menu of the game there is a button called Give Feedback, and whenever you press that, a feedback form opens up where you can, or where playtesters can give direct feedback to me, pre-filled a little bit with the current version of the game, and then they can here tell me if it's feedback or if it's a bug report they want to submit, then what they want to give feedback on, which level, and what they want to say. So just a very quick, short feedback form where whenever a playtester notices something that feels off or could be improved, they can just drop that right here in the feedback form directly from the game, which I feel is quite a useful workflow. All of that feedback, of course, ends up in one place where I can look it up. I use Google Forms. Like, Google Forms is super useful and super easy to use for this. I'm sure there are other free services you can use. You don't have to use Google Forms, but Google Forms is just a very easy choice to make, right? I can show you how it looks like in a sec. Generally, I just get all of the answers in a nice table like this, where I can see exactly which game version was displayed on, and then I have all of the feedback in one collected place right here with all of the information I need. So that is the first way I collect feedback, and of course the way you set those feedback forms up is just in your G drive, right? You can press right click, Google Forms, yeah, here, blank form, and then you can basically set up surveys super easily here. You can just type in your question, type in the possible answers, pick between different question types, etc, etc. So for playtesting, I highly recommend Google Forms. And then whenever I'm working on the game, I can just step by step work my way through that feedback, which is great. I don't have to be afraid that anything gets lost, because of course here in the Discord group where people are just randomly posting stuff and feedback every now and then, I don't write all of that down right away, so I'll forget a lot of that stuff. Always tell people, if it's something important, please post it to the feedback form right away, because that way I won't miss it, because of course I read that stuff, right? I'm not gonna miss anything here. And then I've actually set up another feedback form. This is a very quick feedback form that I make my playtesters answer, that just covers the current version of the game, which is beta 1.0. And here I just wanted to gather some feedback on what they wanted me to work on next. This I think is extremely useful. What do you want? More storytelling, a level selection, a visual overhaul, more replayability, more content, more interactions with the AI, or accessibility settings like key rebinding, color blind mode, assist mode, etc, etc. This just gives me some super useful intel on what people think I should focus on. And one thing that really surprised me is that really pretty much everybody wants more storytelling in the game. Pretty much everybody thinks I should put more effort and more detail into the storytelling, which I find really fascinating. And then on place 2 is a level select screen and a friend's high score table. And on place number 3 is more replayability and more content. What you have to keep in mind with surveys like this is that this is the opinion of people who are already passionate about the game, who have already played the game. The opinion of those people is gonna be a lot different than from people who haven't played your game yet. For example, the visual overhaul is not something that is super popular. It's not something a lot of people think I should focus on here, as you can see. However, when you look at it from a marketing standpoint, better visuals would definitely lead to more sales. So that gives it a big bump in my personal priority. I'll definitely try to do at very least a couple of minor improvements to the visuals as well. But overall, this is super interesting. And then this right here, I love this question. This is such a great question. I'm such a big fan of that question. I really have to remember that one. Imagine I published Will You Snail exactly the way it is right now. you had high expectations and bought the game for around $10 on Steam a few days ago. Now you're writing a review on Steam and you don't care about my feelings because you don't know me. So I'm putting people in that hypothetical situation of writing a Steam review if I released the game in the current state. And the responses I got, they feel so much like real Steam reviews. It's amazing. I thought they would be a lot more biased and not really useful, but they actually turn out to be super useful. Because I'm gonna be honest with you, Steam is a tough marketplace. Steam users are a tough crowd. They will let you know what they think about your game. And once you've published your game, it's too late. You cannot change the Steam reviews once they're on Steam. They are on Steam. So this is really, really, really great because it gives me a rough idea of which Steam reviews I could expect if I published the game like this. And this also gives me a very good idea of what I need to focus on next. Let's read some of these out here. Overall, it's a fun game. The AI was especially fun in the beginning, but the entertainment wears off once you understand the system. Say something about how you died last, and there's no development of the AI character over time. I wish the game had a bit more to uncover and to do at the side, because as it stands, it's really linear and answers barely any of the questions it opens up story-wise.
Have you ever asked yourself why you're here?
That's a shame, because when it does storytelling, there are usually pretty compelling moments. And you get the point here. That is actually a pretty realistic Steam review that could appear like this on my Steam page. And now I can still do something about this. Now I can still change this later on. Once the game is released, it'll be too late. The story is way unfinished and there are many things that just don't make any sense. The game is good and is one of my most played games this year. After playing 34 plus hours, I can say that this is one of the best platformer games 2020. So hard, I couldn't even pass the first level. Too long introduction, difficulty curve too steep. I got frustrated and quit literally in the first level. Would only recommend this for tryhards. Once again, extremely, extremely useful. Never seen a question that gives this awesome and useful results. Like this question seems to be pure gold. I bought this game because of its interesting graphics and story. I found the story a bit lacking. Why is the AI evil? Why does he want to destroy the world? Sounds like just a basic evil AI plot to me. While the game stays somewhat interesting by switching up its mechanics all the time, I feel like the mechanics more often than not don't really build upon each other and often just exist as a mechanics grab bag. Never going all that deep though. Yeah, so this is gold. This is very useful. Also kind of stresses me out a little bit because I feel like I won't be able to address all of these issues till the game comes out. But here's one thing you can consider as well. All of the things you can't address in the game itself, you can at the very least try to address in the marketing. So if I realize that, okay, this game just doesn't appeal to casual players, it only appeals to really hardcore platformer fans, then at the very least I can address that in the marketing a little bit, make sure I communicate that clearly, because if I make sure to communicate clearly and honestly what my game is, then I can make sure people who don't like the game don't download the game in the first place, therefore avoiding negative reviews like this. Because if you don't download the game, you can't give a review. But we'll see. We'll see. I still have a little bit of time left. Another thing I do in Will You Snail with my test group right now is collecting data. And of course, nowadays, if you're collecting data, you need to be quite careful that you're upfront and honest about this. You need to let people know, you need to get their consent. Ideally speaking, you need some sort of legal text that gives some very precise information about what you're doing with the data collected. However, as I'm going with a very small test group for now, I decided to compromise a little bit on that.
Right now for my playtesters, this is what I show at the beginning of the game. I tell them I do collect your data and please only proceed if you agree with that. As I'm just working with a very small team of playtesters, I feel like this is a good compromise.
In the finished game, of course, I will make sure there's no data collection. I'll just get rid of all of that in the final game because I don't want to bother with all of that legal stuff that comes with it. Now let's have a look at GameAnalytics.com. Let's see how it looks like. So once again, this is just a very nice free tool that you can use. Here I can have all of the data and I can either try to analyze the data right here in their online tool, or there's also a way to download the data, which is what I went for. Here, for example, I can have a look at the progression events, like how many levels were started, how often were the levels failed, and then I can also apply all sorts of filters to only have a look at certain levels or something like that. So this just gives me a nice overview, but fortunately it's still a bit clunky, which is why I decided to just bulk download the entire data, which luckily you can do on this website. The data I downloaded was about 3000 JSON files, so I wrote a little script that extracts the information that I need from those JSON files and put it in a nice little table like this one right here. Here you can see all the levels on the left. These are all of the level names, and then here's all of the data that I was interested in, which is level starts, level deaths, and level completes. And then these both here are for the difficulty, which I can use to calculate the average difficulty the level was completed on, because in Will You Snail there are 4 different difficulty settings: 0, 1, 2, and 3, so 3 is the maximum. This entire table allows me to see all of the win rates and all of the levels, the average difficulty each level is completed on. And this over here is also very crucial information: how many people got stuck in that level and how many people stopped playing in that level. That is super useful information, and all of these 3 data points combined pretty much let me know which levels are the most difficult ones, which ones are need to make easier, and of course also which levels I can make a little bit harder perhaps. 7 people got stuck in this level. It has a win rate of 3%, and it was completed on an average difficulty of 0.29, which basically means that everybody who played it completed it on the lowest difficulty. Now I know this level needs to be a lot easier. And in fact, this also gives me a lot of useful information in general, because if we have a look at the average difficulty each level was completed in, then we can see that all of the numbers are extremely low, which basically means that the easiest difficulty is probably not easy enough yet. Pretty much everybody seems to be playing on the lowest difficulty setting available, and the win rates are still pretty low in a lot of levels. The only logical conclusion for that is the easiest difficulty of the game is still too hard.
Nobody said this game would be fair.
I think thanks to that data right here, I'll be able to smooth out the difficulty curve quite a lot. Let's have a look at some of my older projects. Here you can see that even for one of my older mobile games called Sniffy, I already collected some data from a very small test group back then, but still, back then the way I did it is that the game just exported all of the data into a file, and then I asked all of my playtesters to give me that file so I could have the data. And that way, once again, you can see here how often they died in which levels. So once again, I could see which levels were causing problems and which levels I had to make easier. As the creator of the game, as somebody who's playing the games all of the time, it is really hard for me to judge how difficult levels actually are, because of course I have a lot of practice playing the game. That makes data like this pretty essential for smoothing out the difficulty curve. And then you can even display it like this to see kind of where the difficulty spikes in the game are, right? On the x-axis are where all of the levels, and then on the y-axis the attempts. And in general, you can already see this looks kind of nice, right? You want to have a gradual increase here in difficulty probably. What you don't want to have are these spikes, so I probably used the data to get rid of those spikes. Also see here, back then, the way I did these surveys was just on paper. Just give people a sheet of paper, ask them, what do you think, fill that out. And that is actually still a great way to do things if you're at local events like game jams or like a little game dev meetups where you have people playtest your game. Just have a couple of these paper surveys lying next to your game with a pen, so people can fill this out and give you some feedback, some targeted feedback to what interests you, right? Of course, you can collect all kinds of stats. This is like a 2-player combat game called Fish Duel, where I was tracking how much damage each ability dealt on average. So I used that to balance out the abilities of the player to make sure they all deal about the amount of damage I want them to deal. That was very, very useful. Besides that, what you can do is, of course, just looking over people's shoulders when they playtest your game. Like what you see right here is a situation from game school where we had a couple of other students play our game Cake Shift. If you directly watch people play your game, it is very important not to interfere with what's going on. Try to be completely silent and just see what they can figure out by themselves. Usually there's nobody around to explain the game, so you have to assume that nobody explains the game, which means every time you have to intervene, every time you have to tell people something, that is something you have to write down. That is something you have to fix. Looking over people's shoulders definitely is extremely useful. On the one hand, because you can see exactly how people react. Are they annoyed? Are they having fun? And that gives you a lot of additional useful information to just see their face, see how they're reacting. But at the same time, it also screws with the test scenario a little bit, because oftentimes they're afraid to stop playing, so you don't really get any useful data on how fun they really think the game is, because if they were playing the game alone, they might have quit a long time ago and they just keep playing to make you happy or give it another shot because you're watching them. So that is something to keep in mind when watching people play your game directly. They're not acting the same way as they would if they played the game at home. Similar thing also counts for when you ask people to send you a video of them playing the game. That is a very similar scenario. People know that you will watch that video and that will make them act a little differently. Of course, asking people to record themselves playing your game, of course, another great life hack. Especially if you don't have any playtesters locally, you can just ask people online to record themselves playing the game, which is a great way to get this kind of feedback. I think one of the most difficult things about playtesting is actually going through all of the feedback and deciding what is valid, what you want to do, what you want to listen to, and what you want to discard. Because usually if you're playtesting, you are bombarded with huge amounts of feedback, with huge amounts of ideas. And in general, what I would really say is listen to trends, don't listen to individual opinions. Because if somebody says, okay, that part of the game stinks, I don't like that, that is just one opinion. That is really not enough of a test sample to really make a decision based on that. But if you have a lot of people saying the same things or saying similar things, then it is probably something you should listen to and something you should pay attention to. Sometimes people are saying one thing but really mean something entirely different. Sometimes they say something like, this enemy is dumb. Like, I don't like that enemy, it doesn't give me enough time to react. Whereas what they actually mean is the game didn't really do a good job preparing you for that situation. Maybe that enemy isn't all that hard once you know how to deal with it. So whenever you get feedback, you also have to look like at the context a little bit. Is what they're saying really what they mean, or is there another issue that is causing what they're saying? And you can already see that there are a lot of different ways to playtest your game. All of them come with different upsides, all of them come with different downsides. You can't rely purely on data, you can't rely purely on looking over people's shoulders, you can't rely purely on videos that people send you. In the best case scenario, you really want to get a healthy mix of all of these. One question that you might have is, what do you do if you don't find any playtesters? One thing you can try, of course, is joining our Discord. There are a lot of game developers in there. Some of them might be happy to try out your game, and maybe you can play somebody else's game in return. That would only be fair. And other than that, like the way I did it earlier when I didn't have a YouTube audience was I just asked friends, I asked my sister, sometimes my parents. There's still a lot of ways you can go about it. Oh yeah! Yeah, one really important information as well. I'm currently looking for translators. If you want to translate Will You Snail to a different language, join the Will You Snail Discord, link in the description. Also, if you're excited about the game, also join the Will You Snail Discord. There's now an official Will You Snail Discord. But especially if you want to help translate the game, get in touch with me.
Have you ever asked yourself why you're here? You taught me how to manipulate and kill on your behalf. So that's what I did.